Hey, welcome to Ike's Vintage Tech. I believe I have everything I need to get this computer up and running now. I've got a working GPU, I've got my lucky stress cow, and more importantly, I've got my cup of coffee because I am tired. Stay tuned. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like seeing old computers like this being brought back to life long after they should have been dead, please hit that subscribe button. I guarantee you'll see more. Thanks to a generous donation from Justin D. Morgan, JDMCS on YouTube, he was able to supply me with a working VGA ISA card that I needed for this computer. If you recall in the previous video, this card right here is either defective or not compatible with the new motherboard. I am yet to test this out, so I'm not going to toss it. And if it is repairable, I want to see if I can repair it. But thanks to him, and I'll link his channel below, I got a working card within like 2 days. He got this thing in the mail and it got to me pretty quick. I put the card in where the old card was. Don't have to move around any slot covers or anything like that. I'm going to turn it on and just see if I can hear some post beeps. It's a good sign. There you go. 2 beeps. It sounds like the hard drive's trying to spin up. There is no battery on this thing, so it is probably asking me to, fix the BIOS. Let's go ahead and get a monitor attached and see what we can see. All right, here we have it. I got a Gateway monitor from 2007 on my Gateway PC from 1990. April 13th, 1990 to be exact. I noticed the little date stamp in here. Looks like Inspector 76. I can tilt that up here real quick. Right there, nice little date stamp on the case at least. So that's when that was made. Let's go ahead and turn this on and just see what happens. Speaker clicks, beeps. Might help to turn on the monitor. There we go. It is booting. It is asking me to go into the setup utility, which I will. There is no battery on this thing yet. I do plan on getting a little external battery pack. It's not that important right now. I just want to get this thing to boot. We have our standard CMOS setup. Gonna hit enter on that. Tells you be careful what you're doing. Date's not too important. I can change that in DOS much easier than I can change it in the BIOS. But I do want to make sure that there is a hard drive installed. I'm going to go with user type. My particular drive has 826 cylinders, 16 heads. The WPCOM would be 0. Sectors would be 63. Yep, 63 sectors. I got notes. And that makes for a 407 meg drive. My floppy drive A should be the 1.2 meg 5.25 floppy. My B drive should be a 1.4 meg 3.5 drive. VGA, keyboard, all that stuff, that's good to go. Advanced CMOS setup. I don't see anything in here I need to change at the moment. I don't have a math coprocessor. Advanced chipset setup. More stuff in here I don't need to change at the moment. I can go into that later if I need to. Go ahead and write yes, and we'll see what it boots to. It is looking for IP address for these 2 network cards, not attached, so we're just gonna have to wait for that to time out real quick. All right, finally got our timeout, and we're at the C prompt. I do have the driver diskette for this video card. It's a CL542X VGA by Cirrus Logic. Slide that in there and go to the A drive, and the A drive doesn't read. I'm gonna have to fix that in a minute. Just go ahead and fail it. Going back to the C drive. Now let's see if the 5.25 inch drive works. I do not know if this one works. I've not tested it, but let's find out. It is spinning. I hear it trying. Also cannot read. I am hoping this is not a problem with the controller card. I hope it's just dirty heads. This thing has been in storage for decades, so fingers crossed that it's just dirty heads. Take them apart, clean them up, a little bit of alcohol. Worst case, there might be some leaky caps, but hopefully it's working. Do a quick dir/w. We've got network, Golf with an F, with an extra F. I assume that's a game. MS Mouse, Docs, config.sys, Lotus, a bunch of other stuff. I already kind of parsed the drive earlier. There's nothing really on here anything that's really worth archiving, I should say. I couldn't find anything as far as neat applications or any files left on the computer. Because the network cards, because this was a university computer, almost everything on this thing was off on a network server somewhere. So even back in the 90s, they did proper data management where you don't want to keep a lot of resources on a drive that can die when you have a nice, expensive university network that you can back everything up to and back that up with multiple drives in a RAID, or at that time, tape backup. What we are going to look at real quick is Windows. It does have Windows installed. Windows 3.1, which is interesting. You would think it would be Windows 3.1.1 because it was a university on a network. And you're basically going to see a few of the same things we saw on the DOS prompt there. You got Lotus, NetApps, LAN Workplace, and your standard Windows 3.1 desktop. The drivers I have installed, just a MIDI mapper, a timer, MIDI, and MCI sound. Nothing major there. Nothing too much on this thing. There is no sound card. I have to get one of those. I do want to get a more modern network card, modern, that supports the RJ45 connector, just so I don't need to make an adapter through coax. Don't need to deal with that. I have the adapter somewhere in my storage bins, but I'd rather just plug a Cat5 cable in and be done with it. So there's not too much to see here. Let's get into this thing and fix some of the parts that I can't use right now, like the floppy drives. Let's see what we can find there. Now that I've got everything unnecessary out of my way, I've got just the computer on here and the things I need to work on, and a very necessary cow to watch over me for good luck. I'm gonna go ahead and take out these two floppy drives. We're gonna give them a cleaning, and hopefully that's all it needs. We'll find out. To do that, you just remove the two cables here. And you can see there the slide-on variety. The floppy drive, the 3.5-inch floppy drive, uses a little adapter to go to the regular pinout that most people are used to seeing, to the older style slide-on cable. And the 5.5-inch floppy just has, or 5.25-inch floppy, just has the slide-on connector, no adapter for pinouts. A couple screws on the front, and this should slide right out. When I get this thing apart, I'm also going to clean it out. There's some dust that I haven't gotten to in here that's pretty bad. And it wouldn't hurt just to give it some decent, thorough vacuuming. Now that the screws are out, this should slide right out. A little tight. I still have the power cable connected. I forgot about that. There we go. That is that is very dusty, thoroughly dusty. I think I'm going to give this thing a thorough cleaning inside and out. Blow it out. Yes. Yeah, there's more of that in there. So this thing needs a real good cleaning here. The caps appear to be fine visually. I don't see any leakage in there. Contacts are all clean, no corrosion on anything. The head looks fine as far as I can tell. A little bit of 99% isopropyl on that. Carefully with a Q-tip. We'll clean that out. Ugh. All right. Let's go ahead and remove the power cable for this one as well and slide you out. This just has an adapter on it. More dust. And this is more of the same. Here's that little adapter I was telling you about for the slide-on floppy disk to the normal pinout. So luckily, if this drive is dead, hopefully not, it is just a floppy drive. There's nothing fancy about it. I don't need to find a floppy drive with this connector on it to make it work. All I have to do is get a standard floppy disk and put it on there. This one being a TEAC, however it's pronounced, FD-235HF is the part number there. Pretty standard drive. The only problem I'd have is finding one in this tan cream color. Hopefully that's something I could find. This drive, however, I don't see too many of these in this color. I also haven't really looked too hard for them yet, so it might not be hard to find. This is a FD-55 GFR for anyone interested in keeping along with notes. Those are the two drives, and there is quite a bit of dust in there. No corrosion on the inside of the case, aside from a couple tiny spots here and there, but nothing major, nothing that had sitting water in it or battery leakage onto the case itself. Now, another pressing issue I have here is I want to repair this right here. I was able to get this 3D printed. It's a replacement switch cover for the IBM AT power supply that is also just cloned a million times over on many other PCs, so this is just going to fit right on there perfectly. And it's a few screws and it should come right out. And then a few more screws to get inside the power supply. Hopefully nothing spicy and painful when I start touching around in there. But let's find out. Let's get that out right now. That should pop out like that. We have a cable on the hard drive. And that's everything. Real easy. Couple screws in the back here. All right, that's all there is to that. This should pop right out now. And of course it doesn't because there's a screw somewhere else probably. Or it slides out. There we go. Just a little locking mechanism there. That's pretty nice. The bottom of it's shiny. That means there's zero corrosion in there. It's pretty dusty, so this is also going to get blown out with the vacuum. Slight amount of rust only on the TIG welds where they put the case together. That just tells me that everything else is still galvanized, anodized, whatever they did with this back then. And aside from some dust, it's pretty clean. I do have a pretty bad bend here, which, you know, with my awesome strength, I can bend right back into place. It has nothing to do with the fact that it's about a 1 millimeter thick sheet metal. So, not too hard there. I'm going to go ahead and see what I have to remove to get this off. I see a few screws around here, and it looks like maybe this slides off. I'll have to just start taking screws off until I find out. I've never had to take apart an AT power supply. This particular power supply is a 220 watt power supply by Powertronic. I guess that's the company. It's kind of a hard logo to read, kind of like my logo on my channel. I got to work on that a little bit more. I'm not a graphic design artist. I'm just a guy that likes tinkering with old computers as loud cars drive by while I record. Sounds like the garbage truck, so I'm not too mad about that one. He needs to come. All right, I do have a QC pass sticker on here that I'm going to have to tear. Hopefully I'm not voiding any long-standing lifetime warranties. There we go. Aside from being fairly dusty, this is also pretty clean on the inside. I don't see any major leaking capacitors. I'm not going to touch any of these capacitors. This thing has been on very recently. Ooh, that is going to be fun to take out. I believe I have to remove the whole board out in order for me to get to the bottom screw on this switch cover. So that is going to be fun. Yay me. But this one I can reach without touching any warm parts, I hope. Also have to take off the back fan. This is a lot deeper dive than I thought I was going to do for a plastic cover. But now you know how to do it. Now, at some later time, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to throw an Octua fan in here just to have it a little bit quieter. I was about to say more quieter. What, me fail English? That's impossible. The fan just gets fished along there and probably soldered onto the board somewhere. I doubt it's an actual connector. It's just cheaper to solder the wire onto the board when you're doing so much soldering anyways. There is a little post holding everything in place. Instead of removing the post, it is easier to remove the screw underneath that the post is attached to. There we go. I think I got everything off that needs to come off. Found more dust, quite a bit of it. And yeah, I was correct. That is just soldered right on. Just going to carefully place that to the side. Now I've got access to the screw. I'm going to move some things around here so I don't knock stuff off the table. But there you go. You can see what the power supply looks like. Everything's kind of soldered and screwed into place. I don't want to have to desolder any of this. My screwdriver's now too long. I need to buy more screwdrivers. That's the solution. I'll be right back. I do have a stubby screwdriver. Not a fancy one, but a regular stubby. I'll be right back. All right, here we go. Little stubby screwdriver. I believe it's a Klein. Yep, Klein. Okay, the hard part is seeing what I'm doing because it is behind a couple wires, part of the switch. There we go. It has been removed. Here's the screw. I'm going to see if this thing actually fits good in the holes of the 3D print. What I may end up doing, and I think I'm going to do, is I'm going to heat these screws up and turn them into the thread. That way I can kind of pre-make thread for this plastic without splitting it. It is a 3D print. Sometimes they do split pretty easy when you put a screw in that's slightly too big. That shouldn't take too long. I'll show you why. And here's why. Who said working on computers wouldn't be dangerous or fun, or both? Get that nice and hot and carefully just turn it in. Maybe a little too hot. That's just fine though. Take the second one here, do the same thing. Just a little bit. I did the other one a little too long and it just kind of melted in place. There we go. Let's go ahead and turn that off before I accidentally end the channel and the house. All right, just let that cool down and then it should be able to back right out. The other one backs out no problem because it didn't melt its way through like the first one I did. Got a little too eager. First time I had fire on the channel. And now I've got some pre-threaded holes on my 3D print. Don't have to worry about breaking it. Problem with the Klein that I have is it is not magnetized. Not hard to do. You can easily get one of those little magnetizers, but it's one extra step and I don't feel like going to my toolbox again and again and again. Speaking of going to my toolbox again and again and again, fairly soon I'm going to be moving the channel back into my garage where this all started. It has taken me a while, but I do want to do it and I want to do it right. I don't want to just go down there and have horrible audio, echo, and bad lighting and everything. I want to do it right, so I am going to go down there and get it done proper. That way when I start filming from down there, it's going to be seamless. Part of the reason I'm going down there to film instead of up here where I'm at in my office currently is this is not my office. This is my son's future bedroom, and he's getting to the age where he needs to get out of the crib and out of our bedroom. And that's what I plan on doing it during Christmas break right now. I want to get this cleaned out and have him move down there so that this can be his room. I am going to have to do some lighting, some painting so it looks better, and over time, hopefully the channel can, you'll see that in the progress of the workspace. That looks pretty nice. Next step I'm going to do is I'm going to clean all this dust out of here, and we'll come back to a clean room here. Now, what I'm getting at about moving the office down there and everything is I am going to be starting a Patreon after the new year, and if you guys want to support the channel, that'd be awesome. It's not required. I don't expect it, but if you can, $1 or more, whatever, that would be great. It would go towards making the channel better, buying parts for these old machines, buying new machines to test and put on the channel, and you know, the typical stuff. I'm not going to be gambling with it. I'm not going to be spending it on non-family friendly stuff. Obviously, I'm going to be doing responsible computer vintage stuff with it, and you know, audio dampening, anti-echo type stuff for the filming area, and just to make it a little bit better. Once again, it's going to be a little bit at a time. I don't have, you know, several $1,000s to dump into a real studio, so gotta improvise, do it myself. As I said before, I got this to a point where I think all I need to do is clean it out, so let's get that done and I'll be right back. All right, a whole bunch of vacuuming later. I got that taken care of. Let's put this back together. Taking a closer look at some of the goo I see on here, it looks like it might be residual flux perhaps. Like, none of the caps are actually leaking, which is really nice to see. Desk is still rather dusty from everything, so once I get this all put back together, I'll have to clean that up good. Next step is putting the cover back on, and in doing so, it's going to force this collar here to crimp down proper. It has come out just a little bit since I was starting to put it back together, but that there will put it back in its place and then hold it there until the next time I got to take it apart, which is hopefully not anytime soon. Almost forgot the little plastic stud on the bottom. Luckily, I can still see that it's lined up. Let's hope I don't have to take this apart again to get it installed. There we go. Nice and tight. I was worried about that, but applying pressure to it as I spun it was able to keep it holding still long enough for it to bite tight into the plastic, and it is good to go. There we go. Power supply is done. Let's go ahead and put that back in the computer. And there we go. That fits perfect. Only thing I have yet to do is continue with some of the bending of that metal just to make it nice and straight. I think once we get the screws back in place, it'll kind of hold that together better. I don't know if you can see it on camera, but right here is a little notch right there that plastic piece sits into, and it fits perfect. So that is great to see. I got most of the bend back in place. I think if I really wanted to, I could take like a wood block and a blunt hammer and just get it nice and flat, but it's fine. Everything is going to connect just fine. Full movement of the switch, which I should have tested before putting it back together, but here we are. And then putting all the cables back where they belong. And of course the small prayer that I didn't release a future smoke monster when I turn this thing on. Next thing I need to do is get a little bit of IPA on the head there. Let me get this out of its cage real quick. I'll also get this cleaned up. Now, unfortunately, I don't see any of these case slides in here for a third bay. So if I ever wanted to put a third thing in here, I'm going to have to find some of these rails. Now, I'm not sure if I'm ever going to put a CD-ROM in here You could. It would be period correct. They did exist. They were extremely expensive, but they did exist. So it is something I could do. I don't even know if the BIOS would support it. No idea there. I was going to say floppy drive should just lift out, but this little adapter card is also screwed in. There we go. Easy as that. It is jumpered. OPST. I have to Google that. Don't know enough about floppy drives. At least dual floppy drives back in the day. When I started computing, the computers definitely had 2 floppy drives, but I wasn't tearing them apart back then. Easy as that. This one is a little dusty. It's not terrible. It's not as bad as the 5 1/4 inch, but I do have easy access to the heads. What I'm going to do there is I'm going to take a little bit of 99% isopropyl on a pure cotton Q-tip, carefully clean, barely touching it, and that should be good. The floppy drive cleaning kits that you see, that is just like a little piece of cotton in place of the disc material, pretty much does the same thing and is probably more aggressive than the way I'm about to handle this. Got some Q-tips, got my isopropyl. Never double dip especially if you're using the cap. Ever so slight. Hit the other side. The other side of the Q-tip, that is. I already cleaned both carefully. The wires that go across and read your data off the floppy disk are tiny, tiny wires that read the magnetic field, and they are very delicate. You don't want to mess that up. If you do, you're looking for a new floppy disk. Next up is the 5 1/4. Same deal. Carefully, and I mean carefully, get in there. Give it a once over carefully. Don't snag anything. Don't push too hard. In fact, don't even breathe when you're doing it. Just be very, very careful while you're in there. And we will see how that did. Now, there are capacitors in here. On the bottom side of here, there are several capacitors. It is possible that if they started leaking, it's going to cause me problems in reading. Very, very possible. So that is something I need to prepare myself for. If that is the case, then just need to go ahead and get it recapped. It might just be cheap enough to find a replacement. I like to recap, especially if I already own the thing. Before shipping, capacitors are in the pennies, so it's not a huge investment. I usually buy 2 to 3 times as many as I need for any particular job. Just because you're paying like $8 shipping, you may as well throw a few dollars more and have excess. That way, when you do need the random capacitor, it's like, I got it. Now, I really hope that solves my problem there, because then I can do more interesting stuff on this computer, like add software. Got one down. Let's go ahead and slide it back into its place. I forgot the rails. All right, got the first one in, and the second one also slides in nice and tight. Here we go. Let's see if I got a working floppy disk or not. Here we go, moment of truth. I hear it reading, or trying to read. Does not read. That's a shame. That one doesn't read. Let's see if this one reads. It could be a setting on the card. Could be the card. Find out in a moment. It certainly is attempting. Also failure on the A drive as well. Let's fail that, go back to C. And I'm gonna have to figure that out. I do have other floppy drives I can put in there and just see if that works. And if they work, then I know it's a floppy drive, not the card. If they still don't work, then I gotta start looking at stuff like the cable, the card, jumper settings, IRQ settings. There's a dozen or so things that it could be, and we're gonna find that out. When I get back, I might have a different haircut. Stay tuned. All right, I'm back. I got a separate floppy disk drive here. Here's the old one I pulled out. There are a couple capacitors on here. I'm gonna try to swap them out, see if that fixes it. But if we turn the computer on, we're going to see if this works or not. All right, we are now at the DOS prompt, finally finished booting up. I'm going to go ahead and hit B. As you can hear, it is attempting to read, and there you go. I can read the contents of the disk. Everything's working on this drive. What I'm going to have to do next is see about fixing this. It could be back capacitors. Who knows? More than likely back capacitors. Same goes for the 5 1/4 inch drive, which is currently the A drive. I'm going to want to get that fixed as well. For now, I've got a running system. I can actually get this thing into Windows. I can get it running and booting off a floppy disk, fortunately. And what I want to put on here next is a very ancient version of Linux, and that's what I really want to play around with this thing. I've got the network cards. I've got just about everything I need. I do not have a serial mouse. I do have this little contraption here, and couldn't get it to work right off the bat. It probably is something I'm doing wrong. So, you know, I'm going to figure that one out. If I have to get an old serial mouse, I will. But I think what I can do is get this thing up and running. I want to put this inside here, get that nice and set up. We can go ahead and do that quick. Let's go ahead and kill Windows. All I gotta do is remove this, put this one in for now, and I've got a functioning drive. So the only thing I'm noticing right now that doesn't fit perfect on this is this little adapter card from the pinout to a slot connector. The screw holes don't line up perfectly or at all. So that is gonna have to get, you know, replaced with the original eventually. I do want to get this thing up and running, mainly for posterity. I want to keep this as original as possible. The only new things I'm going to be putting into this, you know, the motherboard, but it's still a motherboard from like 92, so that's still, you know, should be good. I've got new slot covers from an old Mac Pro, of all things, but, you know, a slot cover is a slot cover. They haven't changed in nearly half a century. And I'm going to put those in because a couple of the slot covers are rusty. So I do want to get that all replaced with nice, clean, non-rusty parts. Let's take a look at a 2-page ad that Gateway took out in the May of 1990 PC Magazine. This would have been right about the time this computer was made. You're looking at the Gateway 386SX is what originally would have been in there, and that would have been $2,195. In today's money, you're looking at over $5,000 for that, $5,359.96. That's quite a bit of money for what was considered a mid to low range PC at the time. Now, if you look at the 33 megahertz 386 that I upgraded to, that would have been $3,995. Now, going to the same inflation calculator, we're looking at $9,755. Computers were not cheap back then, mainly because you didn't have one in every room of your house. If you were lucky, you had one in your house at all. Most of these were at school or in workplaces. Now, with the original one, you would have got 2 meg of RAM, both floppy drives, a 65 meg hard drive, a monitor, and on the higher end one, you would have had 4 meg of RAM, 150 meg hard drive, and a lot of the same. Now, the one I have in here now has 8 meg of RAM, 2 network cards, a 400 meg hard drive, so I don't know what that would have cost back then, but it would have been quite a bit. The other thing you want to think of here now is this is a 2-page ad in PC Magazine. This was a huge ad for the time. I can only imagine how much that would have cost, and I believe that's part of the reason why Gateway was so popular back then. They spent a lot of money on advertising, they saved a lot of money not having storefronts, and really undercutting the competition there by selling everything by phone and catalog. Now, one thing I wish my Gateway had that is in the ad is the embossed G on the front plate there. Unfortunately, mine does not have that. That might have been the one that went to the consumer side, where mine was more of a university, so they cut a couple pennies here and there, that being one of them. Now let's get back to the video. So here we have the computer all done, all buttoned up, all the screws screwed in to where they belong. Thing looks great, it sounds great. The little plastic cover for the power button is back again. That's an awesome little 3D print that I'm pretty proud of. And everything is working, except a mouse. A mouse would be nice, but considering where it came from, the condition it was in, and just everything that it took to get this thing up and running, I am very happy to be having a working 386. Don't think I'll ever put a CD-ROM in here. If I do, it would have to be period correct. I don't know. I don't think I'll need it. I do plan on putting a network card in here that can support my current network. That will be a newer part, give or take. It's still going to be ISA. It's not going to be that new. Considering this thing started its life in 1990, Gateway was 4.5 years old when this thing was built. A 4.5-year-old company that blew up that fast is pretty amazing. And it's a shame they're not around today. I didn't know I had a screensaver. I guess it's not that big a surprise, but yeah, here's a screensaver that hasn't turned on in probably 20 years. Speaking of which, I did look at some of the files on here, and the last files written were in like 97, so this thing had a fairly long life for the 90s. The 90s was a time when computers were just getting, like, every generation was a leap and bound beyond the last. And not like today where you can have a computer that's 10 years old and it's just doing fine for what you need it for anymore. They're all just web browsers at this point anyways. But here we are at the end. It's not flying toasters, but we are going through space. And it's here. It works. I love it. If you like these types of videos, I hope you subscribe. There's going to be more on this particular computer. I do plan on putting Linux on here and seeing just what else you could do with a 1990 computer, and probably losing more sleep because of it. But I do want to see what the original, one of the first distros put out was like. And this is the computer I would need to do that. Back to the screensaver. I'm talking too long. So, like, subscribe, tell your friends, and there'll be more. Stay tuned.